Welcome back to A Story to Tell from the campus of Dixie State University. This is Lane Ronnow, and we're talking to Elder Burt. How are you?
Fine. Just doing great. Best day ever. How are you?
Today's the best day ever. Wasn't there a cartoon that used to say that?
I don't know.
Anyway, never mind. Tell me a little bit about yourself, Elder Scott.
Well,
or Elder Burt, I'm sorry. I knew I was going to do that, and I did it.
No problem. All my names are first and last names. Middle name's James, so it's easy to get all three.
James, that's my favorite name.
Oh, good.
Do you know why it's my favorite name?
No.
The Book of James.
Ah, yeah.
My wife's father's name is James. My mother had a brother named James. Her father was named James. We have a son named James.
Oh, my heavens. It is
He was named James not because of the family, because of the Book of James. Now I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No problem. Grew up in Salt Lake and went to school there. Yeah, actually, Emerson Elementary, Roosevelt Junior High, which they've now closed, and then South High. And South is the same way. It's been closed. They used to refer to the high schools in Salt Lake as East, West, and South. One was vacation, one was vocation. South High was vacation, they said. But I tell people it's the only school that they've turned into a college. The campus there on State Street is the Salt Lake Community College. And the Alumni Association's done some amazing things. It still exists today, the South High Alumni Association, and they raise money for scholarships for people for Salt Lake Community College. Following high school, of course, served a mission in England. And
do they speak English over there?
You know, when I got there, I wondered. They picked us up at the airport, and we stopped off at a store on the way, a little shop, and the lady said something, and we all look at each other, and we thought, is that English? But you pick it up after a while. After the mission, attended Brigham Young University, so ended up getting married at that point in time, and life moved on.
How did you meet your wife?
We met at Bear Lake, of all places.
Bear Lake?
In northern Utah. I was home from my mission about a year, I guess, and it was the summertime, and she was attending there as well. But I was invited by some girls in Provo to go up to Bear Lake for the 4th of July weekend up there.
Girls invited you?
Yeah. And then
what was your name?
There were other boys, but
okay.
Anyway, she was invited to come down with the boat from Idaho Falls.
She had the boat?
Her friend had the boat. So we actually had tents, slept on the beach there where Sweetwater Resort is now. It was before that period of time. And met there, and had 2 or 3 really nice days together, and then kind of followed it up that fall semester, and by springtime we were engaged, and in June we were married. So, wonderful lady.
Fantastic. What's her name?
What's her name? Pam Hurd, and she's from Idaho Falls. Sister's kind of famous in Idaho Falls. Her sister was Miss runner-up to Miss America in 1971. She was Miss Idaho. But great family, and one of the reasons I decided that it was a good situation, somebody I really enjoyed and loved, was her family. Very inclusive and very warm and just down-to-earth folks.
I've known some girls from Idaho. I won't tell you about them. They're wonderful people. Tell me about your family, your parents, and you have siblings?
Right, I have my parents, Wallace and Lavella Burt. My dad had a heating and air conditioning business, which all of us, 3 sons, got to work in. And it was the day of conversion when you would take coal stokers and convert them to a gas furnace, and oh, that was a tough job. You'd come home black all over, and what it taught us all was that we didn't want to stay in the heating and air conditioning business. My mom was a Taggart, a descendant of George Washington Taggart, who was one of the men of the Mormon Battalion, and they lived in Salt Lake, grew up in the Sugar House area. That's where we grew up as well. Had 2 sisters. Of course, the parents are gone, but all my siblings are still alive. So.
And your own family?
We have 5. Again, we have 2 boys and 3 girls, and we have 3 of those are located in Salt Lake, 2 in Kaysville and 1 in Centerville. And our son that's been in Reno is actually, looks like he's going to relocate to Farmington or that same area. Then we have 1 daughter who married a fellow from Alabama. And
Alabama?
Yeah, that's what happens.
Foreign country.
That's what happens when you go to BYU. Sometimes your daughters get carried off. Anyway, they're in Tennessee and doing really well. He's a contractor, and they're doing well. All the kids are doing well.
What do they do? What type of work?
Well, we've got the one that's a son-in-law that's a contractor. Actually, our daughter is a lawyer as well. She's not practicing at this point in time. Our
Did she go to BYU Law School?
She did. Mm-hmm. And then she worked in Chattanooga for a while as an attorney before she had her first child. So our oldest daughter is married to Paul Cutler. Paul happens to be working with Cisco Systems out of his home, which is nice. That's one of the blessings of today. He can work with a company like that.
You don't have to get dirty from coal and work from home.
No. Paul also is the mayor of Centerville right now, so he's got the challenges of trying to keep the political ball in the air and the job going as well. So, second daughter's married to a doctor in Amy. She's married to a doctor, and they live in Kaysville. He works with Tanner Clinic. Then our oldest son is an accountant, CPA. And it looks like he's relocating. He's the one relocating to Farmington.
From Reno, Nevada?
From Reno, Nevada.
What took him to Reno to begin with?
He went over there to work with Nevada Gold as a director of tax. And unfortunately took the job when the gold prices were high. And now they're $11 or $12 or $1,200 an ounce, and so they actually are in bankruptcy and going through a reorganization. And this other opportunity came up, and so he's coming back to Salt Lake, which is great as far as we're concerned. And then our youngest, actually, he works for TNT. He actually runs the fireworks tents throughout Utah and Colorado, and interesting job because they do all the work to get a store prepared. They have to make the product, bring the product in, stack the product, hire the employees for a week of work. But he's doing well.
And they just do this for the fireworks?
That's right, yeah. In Utah, you get 2 chances.
2 chances.
Well, actually 3. You get the 4th, you get the 24th, and then they sell fireworks at New Year's as well, but in a smaller way. So.
Well, your children have got you covered. You have an attorney, an accountant, a fireworks person.
Doctor.
Doctor.
That's right, and an engineer. That's pretty
good. You're covered.
We've been really lucky. We just love our children, of course, and the people they've married have just been spectacular. So.
Well, it sounds like it. Tell me about your career.
You know, I also am a CPA and attended BYU, not knowing when I went what I was going to end up doing, but when I served my mission, I served under President J.W. Child, and he was a young 39-year-old CPA who had put his practice on hold for 3 years to be the mission president. And when I came back and started to look at what I would do, he had some influence on what I picked. And I'm really happy that I chose that based on my personality and so forth. But I came out of school and actually worked for Salt Lake County for a couple of years in the auditor's office there.
Who was the auditor at the time?
The auditor was the infamous Jerry Hansen. And
Infamous, explain that to me.
well, he ended up getting indicted for petty cash fraud as the auditor. So anyway, that was a eye-opening experience because that was the days of the commission in the county, and there was a lot of politics going on between the elected officials and so forth. So during that time, I got my CPA certificate and went to work for Paul Tanner at Tanner, Boyce, Garrett, and Parkinson, which was a regional firm. We had some great accounts. We audited the Hotel Utah, Desert Farms, Richard Woodbury Mortgage, Desert News, a lot of really good experience there. I left there and went to work for Sweetwater. This was the day of timeshare, the startup of timeshare.
Sweetwater.
Long time ago. Brian Swenton and
You met your wife up there.
that's right, on the beach. That's
on the
right.
beach of Sweetwater.
That's true.
You went back up there. Okay.
Yeah, we did. Very. And I was there for, I believe, about 4 years, I think, and worked with the resort management team. I was the controller for the people that ran the resorts. I wasn't involved in the sales, but it was an interesting time because we were basically developing fee ownership for a week. And that was really early on in that period of time. But that's in the early 80s when interest rates went boom and sales went boom. And so they filed bankruptcy as well at that point in time. And I went to work with another fellow. We started a little management company and spent a couple of years there. And after that, they wanted to move that company to Washington, and I wasn't prepared to move to Washington, D.C., and didn't think that company was strong enough, and so I didn't go with them, and within 9 months they were out of business as well. So I went back to the CPA and working with one of my friends, and it wasn't quite enough to keep us both going, so I started looking for opportunities and found an opportunity in the paper of a little nonprofit in Salt Lake. So I went in for the interview thinking and learned about them. They were in a little bit of financial trouble. They couldn't balance their books, but the name of the company was the Osmond Foundation, which led to the Children's Miracle Network. And so I thought, well, I'll go help them for 6 months or a year, and so I went to work with them. We were very small at that point in time, been in business about 3 years. The board had told management that we're $400,000 in the hole. If we can't get this turned around this year, we're finished. And so we went in, got the books balanced. It was one of those cases where if you just balanced the books, you were excelling. So anyway, it was so fun, and the things that we were doing were so amazing that I just stayed and ended up there for 25 years working with them, and started as the controller and ended up retiring 3 or 4 years ago as the CEO of Children's Miracle Network. It grew from an organization of about 21 hospitals with about 30 television stations and celebrities as well. The first year we raised about $4 million. Well, currently today it's one of the biggest children's charities in the world. They're raising over $400 million a year, working with incredible hospitals. It's the main children's hospitals throughout the U.S. and Canada. So it's Johns Hopkins, it's Sick Kids in Toronto, and LA Children. So So, and we have about 80 corporate sponsors, and those corporate sponsors are people like Walmart and Costco and Coke and Ace Hardware and Dairy Queen. And so you can see the energy. It was just small, but it was on a track like this. And wonderful, wonderful experience. Pardon?
How did they raise the money?
Well, that was part of the amazing thing. When they started out, there were two guys by the name of Mick Shannon and Joe Lake. And they really came up with the concept. Mick was the head of March of Dimes in Utah. And he'd been raising money, and he and Joe had been doing a little telethon in Salt Lake to raise money for the March of Dimes in Utah. And they were quite successful with it, and so they went to the National March of Dimes and said, we'd like to do a national TV for you, telethon for you, and it would cost $600,000, and we would do it at the Osmond Studios in Provo. And they had at that point in time Marie Osmond lined up and John Schneider lined up as co-founders, and they said no. And so Mick and Joe said, well, let's come up with another concept. So they came up with the idea of networking the hospitals. And the children's hospitals had traditionally not been looked at as charities, but all of them raise money. And so they networked the hospitals together, went out and recruited TV stations, and started a telethon.
Apart from the March of Dimes.
Yes, separate, new charity, started from scratch. And the going back to your question, how do they raise the money? The money's raised mainly $1 at a time. So when you walk into Costco in May and they ask you if you'd like to make a donation to your to Primary Children's Medical Center here in St. George, that whole dollar or that $5 or $10 or whatever you contribute ends up at Primary. So there's no overhead taken out by Children's Miracle Network. And so
there's no overhead taken out?
No.
Whose idea was that? Was it someone there scamming them? That was really wasn't it?
No, it's an incredible organization. The way it exists, the way it functions is the hospitals basically pay a participation fee or buy a local franchise. And so in Utah, for example, Primary Children's is the tertiary care hospital for the major things. I mean, if you have a major child's issue in Utah or even in Wyoming or other area up into southern Idaho there, you end up at Primary. So they treat the cancers, they treat the heart issues, they treat the major accidents and so forth. And so they pay a participation fee to be the Children's Miracle Network hospital in that area. And each one of the hospitals do that. And so that fee comes into Children's Miracle Network. That, along with underwriting money they receive from some of their sponsors. The sponsor not only uses their employees and customers to raise money for Children's Miracle Network hospitals, but they will pay an underwriting fee to children. So that underwriting fee and that franchise fee is the way Children's Miracle Network pays for itself, so that 100% of the money raised at these sponsors and events, they have amazing events as well, but ends up at the hospital. And the other thing was, it's local. When they went in to see Sam Walton, he had his old truck, and Marie and Mick Shannon are riding around in his old truck, and they're talking to Sam about joining Children's Miracle Network as one of the sponsors. And you know, Sam drives them around, they visit a couple stores, and finally he says, you know, this lines up perfectly with Walmart. Walmart's all about local, and 100% of the money we're going to raise is going to help the local community. And we have incredible associates, he said, and they'd love to raise money. And so not a hard sell when you see what it does. And the reason I never left was because it was amazing to go to work every day. I mean, you knew you were doing something good. You were helping kids that needed help. We worked with incredible doctors and administrators from the hospitals as well, and then these corporate sponsors. Our boards were made up of these people. And so we had people like Don Soderquist, who was the CEO of Walmart, on our board, and so we got to interact with those folks, and they basically tutored Mick and Joe and the rest of us along the way, and grew that organization to what it is today.
You mentioned John Snyder and Marie Osmond. How did that get together? What was the connection there?
Well, John was helping Mick and Joe with their other telethon,
Okay.
and Joe was basically an agent at one point in time. He had talent, and he worked in LA for a while, and so he was never afraid to go approach people. So he went to Marie, and they knew them as a result of the other things they had been doing. And basically, it wasn't just Marie. Marie was just teeny at that point in time. It would have been Olive and George and the brothers at that point, and they said, "We'd like you to, be a founding member." And so Marie is still on the board, Jimmy's on the board, family's very active and have been supportive, and John as well. John's been amazing with what he's done, all the movies he's made, and yet he's still every year he's there to the annual convention, and they make visits. Many of the early hospitals and sponsors were a result of those celebrities going with us to meet a Sam Walton or a Dairy Queen or whatever, and it just all lined up. It's kind of one of those ideas you have, and everything just sort of fell in place over the years. But not only the sponsors and the hospitals and the people that work there, the celebrities have been a big part as well. You'd tell Joe Lake, Joe, we would like to get Bo Jackson to come to the convention. We don't know Bo Jackson, but Joe, he was so talented, and he knew so many people that, and lo and behold, there's Bo Jackson at the convention when he was in his heyday, and anyway, Bob Hope was supportive of the telethon as well. So
I met you down at the Tabernacle here in St. George. You and your wife are on a mission there. Tell me about your church services.
Well, we after I retired, we started looking for opportunities to serve, and so we decided that church mission would be a good opportunity, and so we put on our papers and ended up getting called to St. George Visitor Center, and that was a blessing because we had a place in St. George already, and so we're actually living in our home, but we're having fun with it. One of the apostles said, missionary work isn't work, it's missionary fun. And we're having fun. We're meeting people from all over the world. You don't realize how international the little city of St. George is. At the Visitor Center, for example, you meet people from all over the world, and many of them can't speak English, and so they have sister missionaries there who have language skills, and so if we have a French bus show up with 45 people on it, we have a sister meet that bus, and they'll bring them into the Visitor Center. There's over 300 French buses that visit the Visitor Center every year, and over 600 total buses. So we have there's over 350,000 people that see the Visitor Center and the historic sites in St. George, the Brigham Young Home, the Jacob Hamlin Home, and of course the Tabernacle. So we're having a great time with it, giving back, enjoying meeting all of these people and having conversations with them. Some of them are spiritual conversations, some of them are just conversations to get to know people, but we're having a great time.
Tell me a little bit about your wife.
My wife is incredible lady, raised 5 children, and did a wonderful job with them. She wonders if she did a wonderful job with them, but when you look at them, you just really feel blessed that they've gone the direction they've gone and they're doing what they're doing. So she's an incredible lady. I feel lucky to have found her, and she makes me a better person. And she actually taught school. She graduated at BYU as well, and in education, taught at Orem High School for a couple of years, sophomores and seniors, and she said those sophomores were a challenge. They didn't want to be there. The seniors had started to, grasp things a little bit, but after that we got married, and then later in our marriage we moved to Taylorsville, and she ended up becoming an adjunct teacher at Salt Lake Community College, and she did that for 20 years and taught English, some remedial English and some early college classes to get people prepared and ready for GED type classes. So, but very talented, English major, and keeps me straight. So.
Well, I met her over at the Tabernacle that day, and I noticed that she has a sense of humor.
Yeah, she does. Yeah.
Which is the most important part of living, I think.
Yeah, that's right. So we have a great time. We're enjoying our kids and our grandkids. We have 21 grandkids at this point in time, and we're missing them a little bit, but we're so close that they can actually come down here and visit us. So.
You live right here in St. George?
We do. Mm-hmm. We're over off of Dixie Drive in St. George.
When will your mission be over?
We have another 6 months. We finish in February of 2016. So the other part of the mission is the couples you get to work with, and the young sister missionaries at the visitor center. You grow to love them, and you spend a lot of time with them, a lot of conversations, and so that's been an extra special blessing about the mission.
We have about a minute left. What advice would you give young people today?
A couple things. First of all, I'd say set goals, and then be patient, but take the steps you need to take in little steps to get to those, to reach those goals. Yeah, it's amazing if you decide you want to be a doctor. It's a long ways from that decision to getting there, but there are steps along the way, and it's that way with every goal. Just be patient, take the steps, and you'll reach your goals. So I guess that'd be the advice.
Well, Elder Burt, it's been fantastic visiting with you today. I didn't realize what a great career you had when I talked to you over there. You're a quiet giant.
Hardly. I was in the right place at the right time and really blessed. I made that decision to a matter of prayer. I was actually out of work at that time and made a matter of prayer, and the answer to that prayer was Children's Miracle Network.
That's the key to everything. This is Lane Ronnow from the campus of Dixie State University. Thank you very much for being with us.